Hi guys, welcome to part 2 of the FURC core frame repair. In part 1 I showed you how I reattached this arm end and added layers of carbon fiber to reinforce the broken area. Today I am going to show you how I'm going to further reinforce the inside corners of the broken arm and also the other arm that was slightly broken. And I'm also going to do the finishing touches and show you how I prepare the surfaces for finishing, and I will be applying clear coat to this so that it looks pretty much as good as new. Well, as good as we can get it. So let's go to the bench and see what I have got for you guys today. It's a fairly straightforward process today. There's not really much to it, so I think this video is going to be much shorter than part 1. So on the bench we have some sandpaper. I have 120 grit sandpaper and 240 grit sandpaper. I have my magic rocket powder, my cyanoacrylate glue, otherwise known as super glue, and I also have my trusty little toothbrush and some isopropyl alcohol, and I have some matte clear lacquer. This one is from Lidl, so it's pretty good stuff. This dries to a very rigid finish, very similar to the clear coat that is already on this. As you can see, it is a semi-gloss kind of finish on here, and it'll look quite similar once we are done. So the first thing I'm going to do is obviously clean the areas that I will be working on. I do want to get some more of the grass off on this area here where I'm going to be blending the clear coat into the existing clear coat here. So that is for that I use isopropyl alcohol. I'm just going to wet it and let it seep through a bit to soften this the grass residue that's on here, because it's pretty solid and I think it's going to take a while to soften up so that we can scrape it off. I'll also soften up the rest of the frame because I'm going to do my friend a little bit of service and give this back to him in an almost brand new state. I'm sure you'll appreciate that and get it dirty within the first 5 minutes. But hey, there's something pleasurable about putting together a clean quad rather than having it all gross and dirty. So the toothbrush will do a pretty good job of removing all of the skunk that's on here. Okay, so now that that is nice and clean, we can go ahead and start preparing the area for paint. I've already done a little bit of abrasion on this side here, but I'm going to carry on and also do that side, which is pretty wavy and looks pretty ugly. So I'm going to start off with the 120 grit, and all I'm going to do is just break off a piece of sanding paper and just sand it down until I am satisfied that it's smooth enough, but also that it's not gone through into the fibers, into the carbon fibers. So I'm going to make sure that I haven't gone completely through the layer of resin that is on top. So I'm just going to smooth it down. This is never going to look 100% perfect, but the lacquer will then later hide a lot of the ugliness. So I start off with the 120 grit, and once I'm satisfied that it's smooth enough, I'll move on to the 240 grit. And I'll also show you later what happens if you do go through to the carbon fiber, which I can see that I already have on this. It's just I do want it to be smooth, and when I was in the previous video, when I was applying the carbon, the plastic I used to cover it wasn't very straight, so it was a bit too wavy. But that's not an issue. I'll show you how I cover the carbon fibers back up again and how I seal off the carbon filaments later. Okay, so now that I'm sort of satisfied with how smooth that is, I will move on to the 240 grit, which is much finer than the 120 grit. So that will, make the scratches a little bit shallower. So when I put the clear coat on, it will give it a nice texture, but still have enough scratches for the clear coat to bite into the material and stay. I'm not going to be using any adhesion promotion on this. I'm just going to clean it really well with alcohol, and this lacquer does stick very nicely to the sanded surface. So I'm just going to go through all of it with the 240, and I'm also going to pay particular attention to the area that I'm going to blend into the other clear coat. So there will be a part where the clear coat will still be going on top of this unsanded bit, so it'll be a bit weaker and it might chip off, but I don't think anyone's really concerned about how it will look in a couple of months' time once it's all dirty and flown and battered about, if it even lasts that long. Might hit a gate again. Okay, so this is all sanded now. It's all scuffed up to the point where I'm pretty happy that the lacquer is going to stay where I want it to. So the next thing I want to do is just reinforce the inside of the arms a little bit with my magic powder. And for that I just need to clean the inner area where I'm going to apply that magic powder. It's just a little bit of extra reinforcement in these corners, these inner corners here. So along this line on the inside there. So where this folds across there and there. So that is a little bit of a weak spot. So I just want to reinforce that a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scratch it with my tweezers, just to have something for the super glue to bite into. And that will cause the super glue to stick really nicely to the surface. I also have my super glue activator pen right here for plastic, so it will do the same trick on the epoxy as well. Same thing on this arm here. Just scratch it in a little bit. And on this arm here, I can see that the inner layer of carbon fiber didn't the epoxy didn't fully cure through. So I'm going to do a layer of super glue over the whole carbon fiber layer on the inside. So there we go, we've got all the dust out. Now it's fairly simple. All I'm going to do is grab my super glue and add a little bit of super glue to the corner. Let it run down that corner completely, and that one as well. And I'll do this a couple of times just so that I get enough super glue in there. I'll use my tweezers to wick the super glue along the edges that I want. And then I'll grab my magic powder, my rocket powder. And this is like glass. I don't know what it's made of really, but the texture is tiny little glass beads. And all it does is it goes in there and the super glue absorbs it, and it creates a nice little fillet. And then any excess powder is just shaken off. And depending on how thick you want that fillet, you just reapply another layer of super glue and another layer of rocket powder. You'll be done. Once that dries, it dries really solid and creates a really nice reinforcement bond over there. Well, there's one side. We'll do the other side, the same thing. Little drop of super glue. Let it run down the edge. To where I want it to go. Sort of coax it with my tweezers. So put it into the place where I want it. Rocket powder on top. I'm going to do it again, just so I have another layer, a little bit thicker on this side. Once you do the first layer, the second layer of super glue will absorb really well into the rocket powder. You won't believe it, but I have had this little bottle of rocket powder for going 20 years now. Don't know if you can still even get this kind of stuff anymore, but I love it. It's brilliant. So there you go. You see a nice little reinforcement. Let me focus you in here. There you go. Advanced camera control. Should be able to focus you in. There you go. So it just creates a nice little reinforcement fillet on the inside there. And there as well. I'm going to put another layer of super glue just to fix this last bit. Just impregnate all of these little glass beads. There you go. So that's now all impregnated. Nice little fillet. Doesn't look very pretty in here, but the intention is just to reinforce. It doesn't have to look pretty on the inside. The outside, once it is all painted, will look quite nice, and the carbon will shine through very nicely. The same on this side, you know. You can sort of see the bump there, but once it's all painted, it will look very, very nice indeed. And you can see the little fillet there. Any excess rocket powder that stays behind will go away. So now I've also got that, you can see the carbon filaments there. They're trying to come out, so I'm going to cover that with super glue as well. This arm didn't completely break off, this side didn't completely break off, but I reinforced it nonetheless. So just adding a layer of super glue on top of here will make this nice reinforcement really much more solid. There's a bit of a hole over here, so I'm going to add some rocket powder to build that up. And once this dries, I can sand it down. The rocket powder is sandable, so now all I have to do is let this super glue dry. Then I can just sand the stray filaments that are in there, the stray strands of carbon. I'll just sand those away so it looks a little bit prettier. Yeah, so let's just wait for the super glue to dry. When that's dry, I will bring you back to start the painting process. And you'll see how that is done. It's fairly simple, straightforward. There's not much to it at all. Okay, I will see you in a moment. I'm going to clean up whilst you are gone. Okay, so I'm back, and this is all nice and dry, and I've gone ahead and sanded down all those little pieces of strands that were stuck in there, and I've sort of brushed it off. Now I'm going to prepare it for some paint. So we really need to clean this with isopropyl alcohol to remove all of the oils and any dust that's still flying around in here. So I just wet some paper towel, and I'm just going to go in here and clean all the surfaces that I'm going to be painting with the alcohol to remove any oils from my fingers and make sure that it's just nice and clean. You can sort of see how it may look once it's painted. Just pour some alcohol here on this mat. See, when I wet it, all the carbon shines through. So it's going to look quite alright once it's done. Okay, so that's clean. Just do it in there. Clean and dust free. Now I'm going to use some electrical tape to create what is called a soft edge for the location where I don't want to paint. So I'm going to mask off the areas I don't want to paint. And by folding the tape backwards like this, you create a little soft edge. So I want to make it more or less sort of symmetrical, so both sides are identical. And this folded edge, what it will do is when you paint it, the paint will seep underneath that edge and sort of flow in, and it won't leave a hard mark. This is a trick that's used by automotive painters as well. So that's one side. You can just tuck that in. I'm not concerned about the inside. I just want to have a nice soft edge there and a symmetrical line to go to. So I'm going off the first little serrated bit there. You might have to go a bit further back on this side. Let me take this one off and do this one again, just so that they're identical. I'm normally not this anal about this stuff, but it's not mine, so I want it to look nice, you know. There you go, that's more like it. And that's about as good as we're gonna get. There's still loads of dust inside here. That's the inside, I'm not gonna worry about that, that's fine. So the next thing I wanna do is I sort of wanna protect my work area a little bit, so bear with me. Protect the work area with the cardboard. Noise alert. Right, so the first coating of paint is what is called a dust coating. So I'm just going to dust it, and this will allow the paint to adhere better. So I'm not using adhesion promotion like I mentioned. So I'm just going to dust some paint onto it. It's literally a dusting like such. I'm in a well ventilated area, so the windows are open. And I have a fan for some ventilation right next to me, which I will turn on momentarily. Right, so that's the first coating. Now we're just going to let that set for 10 minutes and I'll bring you back. Okay, so I've done the dusting layer. Now I'm going to do the first coat. I might do like maybe 3 or 4 coats with wet sanding in between. So let's do the first coat. And now the trick of this is to apply enough paint so it covers it all uniformly, but not so much as to cause it to drip and run out. So yeah, pretty tricky. Let's go. Good nozzle control is essential. That's a good covering. You see it's a little nice and shiny in your uniform. Nice, my nozzle is clogged up. So hopefully I can unclog it. If I can't, it's game over. Noise alert. Yay, success. Okay, let this dry, and then we'll wet sand it and put another layer on. Okay, so a couple of hours have gone by now, and this layer of paint that I've put on is dried to the touch. So it has a flushing point of 2 hours. So it is now well, degassed enough to flash off and to dry. So now I'm going to wet sand this just to remove the gloss, and then we're going to clean it and give it another layer or two to make it nice and solid. So let's remove this tape from both arms. Remove the tape, and as you can see, it's created a little bit of a line there. I'll clean this all up, and when I wet sand it, it will blend in quite nicely. So I have my trusty little Boss mug here, which is gigantic, so I don't use it for anything except for wet sanding today. And I'm going to be using 240 grit, but this is already used. So I've used this sandpaper before, I just kept it, and I'm just going to lightly wet sand the whole area just to remove this gloss. And wet sanding very softly just prepares the surface to accept another coat of paint. It's important to keep it wet so the surface doesn't heat up under the sanding paper, and because this paint is still pretty fresh, that would be disastrous. And as you can see, when where it hasn't been wet sanded, you can see the water sort of doesn't stick to the surface, but once you wet sand it, it prepares the surface, and you can see that now that the water is completely coating everything, so it's not rejecting the water. So it sort of breaks the surface tension and allows the next layer of paint to adhere properly. So I'm going to go through, just sand this whole thing, and then dry it off, and we can carry on. Okay, so now I'm ready for the final coats of paint. I've sanded it down, wet sanded it all, and it's ready for the next thing. So I'm just going to quickly paint it and take you through it in time-lapse mode. So here goes nothing. And that's it. Now all I have to do is let this dry, and then give it a nice clean when I'm done, when it's dry, and it'll be ready to go back to its rightful owner tomorrow. So with that said, that wraps up this repair. I hope it was enjoyable. I think maybe these last few minutes were a bit boring, but that is the process. Until the next time it breaks, I will see you soon. Thank you. Bye.